Imagine living in a small cell, isolated from the rest of the world, knowing that you are going to die one day, but not knowing when. This is the reality of thousands of prisoners sentenced to death in the United States. An oddity of the American prison system is that an inmate can spend up to 20 years on death row, exhausting the appeals process before being executed. In this video, we're going to take a look at the lives of some of these men on death row. Fred, I deserve to be executed. Simply put, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I deserve to be executed. Frederick still remembers the names of the people he killed. He said he marked their birthdays on his calendar. He's been there for a long time, but he still wakes up every day in a cold sweat when he thinks about what he did, especially to that little girl. She was at the beginning of her life, and I stopped her. How do you think I feel about that? I can't even imagine how I feel. Frederick Beer's life was marred by a tumultuous childhood, and his career took a dark and tragic turn after the untimely death of his sister. This turbulent past would culminate in his conviction for a heinous crime that shocked central Indiana: the murder of a woman and her innocent 4-year-old daughter. The eerie events were set in motion when Beer, struggling with his inner demons and unresolved issues, entered the residence of the unsuspecting victims. At first, he pretended to be lost and confused. He asked them to use the phone, hiding his sinister intentions. He planned to rape the woman, but abandoned his initial plan and embarked on a nightmarish action that would forever haunt the memories of those who would later learn of this tragedy. Beer committed the heinous act of slitting the throats of the mother and her daughter. At the time of his arrest, he vehemently denied involvement in the gruesome double murder. However, the evidence and testimony presented during the trial painted a completely different picture, leading to his conviction and the imposition of the death penalty. Fortunately for Beer, his destiny took another turn. His death sentence was eventually overturned in 2019 due to a ruling that found he had received inadequate legal advice during his initial trial. Instead of facing the ultimate punishment, he was sentenced to life in prison. Dennis Lear does not live as lonely as one might expect in his cell. He has a furry friend, a cat he named Rascal, initially thinking it would be a boy, but it turned out to be a girl. When asked how his cat influenced his outlook on life behind bars, Dennis said, "Well, it helps me get through my time. If I have bad days or I think I can't take it anymore, I come home and she helps me get ahead. She's like my little girl." For Dennis, his cell is not just an enclosed space. It is your home. He confesses that the most difficult experience he has experienced has been losing his mother. To keep her memory alive and stay connected to her, he keeps a photo of her in his cell, describing the comfort it brings him. "I have a photo of her on my wall. It's the first thing I see when I get up in the morning." Dennis Marcus Lear's journey to prison began with his connection to the murder of Marie Klein, a 20-year-old from Elkhart, dating back to December 30th, 1987. Dennis Lear's connection to the case was established thanks to DNA evidence found on Marie Klein, using the state prison system's convicted felon databank. In 2019, his death sentence was overturned due to inadequate legal advice during his initial trial. John Serwatka, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release, has thrived in his prison environment and has become one of the prison's most skilled barbers. Although he lacks privacy, he has learned to embrace his space, considering it more than a cell, his world and sanctuary. Serwatka's life took a dark and tragic turn when he was convicted of committing 4 murders in Indiana in 1998, earning him a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. His mother testified on his behalf, recounting the heartbreaking moments that led her son down a dark path due to constant threats and coercion. Now, John faces the serious consequences of his actions. Amelia Carr, the youngest woman on America's death row, offers a unique perspective on her situation. Instead of referring to it as death row, Amelia and her cellmate, Tiffany Cole, prefer to call it life row. For them, the terminology reflects their resistance to thinking of execution as an imminent event. Amelia firmly states that she cannot allow herself to have the mentality of being executed, as that would mean accepting her fate. She insists on her innocence, describing herself as a victim of unfortunate circumstances, trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. The story of Amelia Carr is especially shocking. She was sentenced to lethal injection for her role in the 2009 murder of Heather Strong, the wife of Carr's boyfriend, Joshua Fulg. 8 months pregnant with Fulg's child at the time, Amelia lured Heather into a storage trailer where she placed a plastic bag over her head, allegedly attempting to break her neck. Amelia insists that she left before the murder took place and that she is the victim of a series of lies. Despite being in prison, Amelia tries to make the best of her time, reading self-help books, exploring her faith, and singing religious songs. He remains hopeful to show that he is still a person with emotions despite the difficult circumstances. As for the mother of 4, her fate took an unexpected turn on May 19, 2017. Instead of facing the death penalty, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the penalty phase of the trial, Amelia's family testified on her behalf, highlighting the consequences of the sexual abuse suffered since her childhood as a mitigating factor. However, these reasons were not enough to change his destiny. John Sirwatka, on the other hand, has found in prison an environment in which he not only adapts, but thrives. Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for committing 4 murders in Indiana, in 1998, John has become one of the most skilled barbers in prison. Although he lacks privacy, he learned to embrace his space, considering it his world and sanctuary. Despite his situation, John finds contentment in his daily life in prison, noting that there is not much privacy. But that is part of his reality. John Sirwatka's story highlights the ability to adapt and resilience, even in difficult circumstances. While many face prison as a punishment, John has found purpose and a way to thrive in his environment. Your response to the lack of intimacy reflects a surprisingly positive outlook. Amelia and John contrast with the story of Dennis Lear, whose cell is not as lonely as one might expect. The presence of a cat named Rascal provides him with company and comfort during difficult times. The loss of his mother, one of the most painful episodes of his life, drives him to keep her memory alive and remain emotionally connected to her. Dennis's connection to the murder of 20-year-old Marie Klein dates back to 1987, and his death sentence was overturned in 2019 due to inadequate legal advice during the initial trial. In this context, the complexity of the legal system and the personal stories surrounding it are revealed. While some find a way to adapt and find meaning in prison, others struggle with the burden of their past actions. The stories of Amelia, John, and Dennis are windows into the moral and ethical complexity involved in the criminal justice system, and how individuals face the consequences of their decisions in extreme circumstances. Continuing with the stories on death row, we find the case of Paul McManus, who stands out for keeping his cell meticulously clean. His space lacks books, letters, or personal items, since he has the habit of getting rid of everything he does not consider useful. McManus does not read or write, spending most of his time cleaning and organizing his cell. Additionally, he has experienced significant weight loss and faces diabetes, which requires him to follow a strict diet. Although far from a comfortable place, McManus finds some freedom in his daily routine and the opportunity to leave his cell to visit the prison hospital. The story of Amelia, John, Dennis, and Paul highlights the diversity of experiences in the prison system. Each individual faces his or her own struggle, whether maintaining innocence in the midst of sentencing or finding ways to adapt to the restrictions of prison life. These narratives offer a more complete view of the complexity of the criminal justice system and raise questions about morality, redemption, and the capacity for change in an environment marked by adversity. The story of Paul McManus, which led him to the dark and desolate death row, unfolds as a story of tragedy and irreversible decisions. His life was filled with conflict and challenges, manifesting itself especially painfully in his marriage to Melissa. Dissatisfied and wanting a divorce, the situation became more complex when faced with the fact that Melissa had custody of their two daughters, Lindsay and Shelby, aged 8 and 23 months respectively. Shelby also dealt with a rare genetic disorder that caused seizures and developmental delays, adding an additional load of stress to the already difficult family dynamic. The breaking point came when McManus received final divorce papers from Melissa. This news triggered a mixture of anger and a sense of betrayal in him, and became the catalyst for a series of events that culminated in an unimaginable tragedy. He took a taxi to Melissa's house, carrying a .38 caliber revolver. In an act of senseless violence, he shot his wife in the leg, causing her to fall to the ground, and then shot her 3 more times in the head, severing her life brutally. McManus's fury did not stop there. He entered the house and found Lindsay and Shelby in their bedrooms. Showing no mercy, he shot Lindsay 3 times and Shelby once, ending both of their young lives. The house, which was once a home, became the scene of an unimaginable tragedy, where a family was destroyed at the hands of the one who was supposed to protect them. After perpetrating these atrocious crimes, McManus tried to escape, heading to the Henderson Bridge, a place that would become the dark witness of his despair. He climbed to the top of the bridge, hoping to end his own life. However, fate had other plans, and he landed in the cold waters of the Ohio River, surviving with minor back injuries. He was arrested, facing 3 murder charges that could put him on death row. During the trial, his attorneys argued that McManus was dealing with mental issues and a drug addiction at the time of the crimes. Despite these defense attempts, court-appointed psychiatrists concluded that, at the time of the murders, McManus was not legally insane. The verdict was clear: guilty on 3 counts of murder and sentenced to death. This tragic outcome reveals the devastating cascade of events that led Paul McManus to death row, a place of shadows where he would face the weight of his actions and await his final fate in a legal system marked by the irreversibility of his decisions. Tragic and heartbreaking, McManus's story serves as a shocking reminder of how individual choices can have unimaginable consequences for all those involved. That's it for today's video. I hope you found it interesting. Have a good day until next time.